Instead of talking about any actual queer media for Pride Month, we're gonna talk about the piece of media that turned me into a big fat I don't have enough spoons to do a particularly well thought out analysis, and honestly, I don't feel like thinking that hard right now. So today, we're gonna rank all 6 Tinkerbell movies because why not? It's important to note that before the movies was the book series, and these books! I don't know what it is about them, but these little chapter books with the watercolor illustrations and pretty titles were like crack cocaine to toddler me. I absolutely adored these books, and I still have the whole collection on my bookshelf. I don't actually remember what happened in them, just that one character cuts off her wings to save Pixie Hollow, which is frickin' metal. And I also had the biggest, fattest crush on Freya the Light Fairy. She's literally so pretty. I'm in love with her. Naturally, my parents were quick to let me know that a Tinkerbell movie was being made since I loved these books so much. The problem is that it takes a really long time for movies to be made, and I was 4 and impatient. I'm pretty sure my parents told me that the movie was going into production around 2006 when I was 4, and it didn't actually come out until 2008 when I was 6, which means by the time I finally got to see the first Tinkerbell movie, I had been waiting for a third of my life! Not only that, but 6-year-old me was livid that the movies weren't actually accurate to the books. So I do have a certain level of nostalgia for the Tinkerbell movies, even if it isn't quite as much as the books. So this past week, when I was feeling burnt out and my inner introvert was popping off, I binge watched all 6 Tinkerbell movies. And of course, since I can't think of anything casually, I decided I would have to rank them. So here is my official ranking of all 6 Tinkerbell movies. Look, I know I said I would be respectful towards the Tinkerbell movies. In last place, Tinkerbell and the Never Beast. I fucking hate this movie. No matter how flimsy the plots are or annoying the characters are, the one thing the Tinkerbell series always has going for it is that it's a really, really pretty franchise. The aesthetic is gorgeous. The illustrations in the books were beautiful, and the movies do not hesitate to bring that same magic into the world that they created. Except for the Never Beast. The Never Beast is ugly. There's just something about the aesthetic of this movie that doesn't feel like a Tinkerbell movie. There's too much green lightning and weird spy fairies, and it just doesn't make sense. I think the plan for the studio after the Pirate Fairy was to make feature-length films centered around all of Tinkerbell's friends, Rosetta and Iridessa and Silvermist and Vidya, and this movie focuses around Fawn. Except they changed her outfit to an outfit I don't like as much as her old outfit, and they changed her voice actor, and they changed her personality, so it feels like she's just a completely different character. I've spent the past 5 movies getting attached to this other version of this character. It just doesn't feel like a Tinkerbell movie. There's also no Zarina, there's no Clank and Bobble, and the vibes are just so off. And then at the end, it just gets sad, and then it ends. I don't get it. It's in last place, and I wish they had just stopped with the frickin' Pirate Fairy. Anyway, moving on. This movie is fine. It's definitely lacking creativity compared to the other Tinkerbell movies that are higher on this list. The Lost Treasure is just, it's such a generic fantasy plotline. Like, ooh, let's go on an adventure and find a magical object. It's just a lot of walking through the woods. And it doesn't really use the fact that we're in this whimsical magical world of Neverland, or the fact that our main characters are literally fairies to its advantage. Something that I really like about the Tinkerbell movies is how strong the ensemble cast is. All of the main characters bounce off of each other super well, and they create a super interesting and entertaining dynamic. The problem with that is that in this movie, Tinkerbell goes on this journey by herself, so she never really gets to interact with the other characters, aside from generic animal sidekick Blaze. The only other main character is Terrence, who also doesn't really interact with the other characters. The movie tries to convince us that he and Tinkerbell have been besties forever, but he's literally a minuscule character in the first movie. And I know they're only doing this because they want there to be a character for people to ship with Tink, but Vidya is literally right there. I'm not going to let this mediocre movie stop me from pushing the gay agenda onto every single character in the franchise. Clank and Bobble are literally married. I don't know what you want me to say. That being said, that isn't my biggest problem with this movie. My biggest problem with this movie is that Tink and Terrence are so freaking annoying. They're just so unnecessarily mean to each other, and they blame the other person for making them upset when they didn't communicate their needs. The point of the movie is the fact that they learn learn to move past this and better communicate with each other, but that doesn't happen until like the last 15 minutes. So for the mass majority of the runtime, they're just complaining to other characters about how annoying and stubborn the other is, and I hate it so much. The whole emotional core of this movie is that we're supposed to care about their friendship, but they're mean to each other, so I don't care. The Lost Treasure isn't all bad though. There's definitely a slight increase in the animation quality, and the ending scene is super entertaining and pretty. The fact that they bring up the idea of surface area earlier on, and that concept pays off when the surface area is increased due to the stone breaking, is really clever. But yeah, it's not bad. The other movies are just better, so let's move on and talk about some better movies. I'm not gonna lie, I expected this movie to be higher on the list because it's the OG, but I actually think it being lower on the list is a good thing because it shows me that Disney was able to recognize what did and didn't work and had the ability to expand upon the world in a way that made it more interesting and more engaging, and that's pretty cool. The original Tinkerbell movie isn't low on this list because it's bad, the other movies are just better. This movie serves as an origin story for Tinkerbell and introduces us to Pixie Hollow through the eyes of the fairies. It should also be noted that this is the first time this world has been shown on screen, and while we might take it for granted now, the visuals are incredibly creative, and I love seeing what naturally occurring objects they use to create this miniature world. Not to mention how clever the integration of lost things is into Tink's inventions. Most of the tools, objects, and houses look like they could realistically be created with the resources these characters have, and that is super cool, and I know a lot of creativity went into making that happen. There's a lot of really good stuff in this movie. The score is absolutely fantastic and super underrated. The scene where Tink dances with the music box is one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise, and it just fills me with so much joy. What really holds this movie back from being higher on the list is the fact that the plot isn't particularly interesting in my opinion. I think it can get away with it more because it's introducing us to this brand new whimsical world, but I just don't find it as interesting as the other movies on this list. Tinkerbell also manages to get on my nerves quite a few times during the original movie. It's not nearly as bad as The Lost Treasure, but she is still pretty damn annoying. I think there's definitely a major shift after the first two movies where her character, while still flawed, becomes a lot more likable and compelling, so I'm not going to hold it against the series as a whole, but I am going to hold it against this particular movie. Why is our protagonist such an annoying ass bitch? I kept going back and forth about whether or not I should place this as number 2 or as number 3 on my list, but then I found out that frost doesn't actually protect plants and I'm fucking gutted. Secret of the Wings was bumped down in the rankings just for that absolute monster of a betrayal. Secret of the Wings follows Tinkerbell as she discovers she has a sister who lives in the winter woods, a place she cannot go because the cold will permanently damage her wings. For some reason, I convinced myself this movie was made in the aftermath of Frozen when everybody was obsessed with the winter aesthetic, but apparently Secret of the Wings came out a year before Frozen, which is pretty cool. I like this movie. I think both of our main characters have pretty compelling motives, and it's really easy to understand why they do the things that I do. I like that we get to see this whole new side of Pixie Hollow, and I especially like that we get to learn a little bit more about Queen Clarion because I adore her and wish she was a bigger character. My biggest gripe mostly surrounds the fact that it feels slightly disjointed from the rest of the series due to the fact that it retcons a lot of the lore that we've been taught about the Tinkerbell universe. We have flown through the winter woods before, we've met the Lord of Winter, and just the idea that there can be more than one fairy born from the single laugh pretty much goes against the only piece of Peter Pan lore this entire series hinges off of. High-key, they could have kept this exact same story without messing up any of the lore if they had just made Tink and Periwinkle romantic interests for each other instead of being sisters. Cause like, I love a good soulmates trope, which is exactly what those matching wings would have symbolized, and it would have made the parallel between Tink and Periwinkle and Queen Clarion and the ice dude whose name I forgot more clear. The younger queer couple could have taught those older than them that there's no reason for love to be forbidden, and my elementary school age closeted ass would have eaten that shit up. But I also know there's literally no way that would have happened because it was 2012 and Disney still throws a temper tantrum over a 3-second kiss between two married women in the background of a Pixar film anyway. I know a lot of people don't like this one because they think Lizzie is annoying, but she's literally 9 years old and not nearly as annoying as Tinkerbell is in the first two movies, so I'm giving her a pass. Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue is just, it's just fun and it's charming. This is the first movie in the series where Tinkerbell genuinely becomes a super likable character, and I think part of that is because of how good her dynamic is with Lizzie. As a kid, this was definitely the Tinkerbell movie that inspired me the most and filled me with the most amount of wonder. I know Tinkerbell technically visits visits the mainland briefly in other movies, but having this one take place in our world absolutely fascinated me as a child. It made me believe with 100% certainty that there were fairies hiding in my garden, and that got me so hyped! I remember making my own little fairy house just like the one Lizzie makes out of a Build-A-Bear box and having my own little fairy field journal. This movie's just, it's so fun. I like all of the characters and it makes me smile, and there's no crime in that. I think Tink and Lizzie's dynamic is really interesting. I think the father has a super compelling character arc, and I love that for the first time we get to see all the main characters work together as a team. We really get to see them interact with each other, build off of each other, and learn more about them as individual characters. It's just so sweet, and it turns me into mush! I don't really have much to say that's negative about this one, other than maybe the fact that the conflict was resolved a little bit too quickly at the end. It didn't manage to make its way to first place on this list, not because it's a bad movie, it's actually a really good movie, it's just the #1 spot is reserved for something that's even better. There's a ton of Vidya and Tinkerbell content, and this is when we finally start to see Vidya become more a part of the group, which I really like. Also, this applies to all the Tinkerbell movies except for the frickin' Neverbeast. But I kind of look like Bobble, and I take that as a personal win. God, where do I even begin with this movie? For starters, I love Zarina. She is asking all the hard-hitting questions that nitpicky movie-loving me wants to know the answers to. I genuinely think she is the most compelling character in the entire franchise, and I love getting to see her arc throughout the story. I love that while she's the main character at the beginning of the film, it still mostly focuses on characters we already know. I think that was a really nice balance that they set. This is another example of a Tinkerbell movie where the entire team has to work together, so we get some really nice interactions between the main cast. They just have such a great dynamic together, and having their talents switch was such a clever plot line! It is so fun, it's so clever, and I love all their outfits. It gives us lots of really sweet moments, it gives us some really great teamwork, and it gives us some great physical gags, which I am a sucker for. I always thought it was pretty obvious that this is supposed to be a Captain Hook origin story thing, but I guess that just depends on how much Tinkerbell lore you know. After my dad's reaction to the end of Secret of the Wings, I made him watch this full movie with me because it is the best one, and he was surprised when we found out that James was Captain Hook. That might just be because he doesn't know anything about Peter Pan lore, but I personally think the reveal's pretty obvious. I really like that they decided to make a movie featuring the pirates. I think it's all too easy when you watch the rest of the movies in the franchise to forget that Neverland is a pre-existing world. It's from Peter Pan. And this is the first movie where they take pieces of the Peter Pan lore that aren't just the fairies and incorporate them into the Tinkerbell franchise. And I love that. I love the characters, I love the comedy, I love the art. This movie by far has the best animation, and I am a sucker for it. It's a guilty pleasure movie for me, and I refuse to take criticism. Except for the only criticism I have, which is that Clank and Bobble are not in it a lot, but aside from that, I love this movie. I adore it. Personally, I think this should have been the end of the Tinkerbell franchise. Having the first movie be about Tink wanting to change her talent but knowing that it's not possible, and then having the last movie be about someone making it possible would have been a really nice full circle moment, and that opening up into the rest of the world of Neverland just would have been a really nice way to end the series. Plus, I just hate the Neverbeast. I hate the Neverbeast and I wish it wasn't made, but that's fine. We're talking about how great the pirate fairy is. So yeah, that is my official ranking of all of the Tinkerbell movies. Like I said before, even though I believe I'm objectively correct because my taste is immaculate, you're allowed to disagree with me, and that's fine. Do you have a favorite? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you also think the franchise needed to be a little bit fruitier? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. But yes, that's all I have to say about the Tinkerbell movies. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in next week's video. Bye!